regarding live loads versus drop and hook, how does a trailer pool at the shipper location impacting the pricing?
Yep.
It is the asset cost for the carrier, but also flexible. Based on your experience, is there a volume cap for which one of these two concepts makes more sense? Jill, go ahead and
Yeah,
take it.
great. Yeah, that's a great question. Steve and Chris, chime in here if I miss anything. It's interesting. We just did a pretty large study on this last year for a client. You know, anytime you can drop and hook, you are in a much better shape with your LTL carriers, and it absolutely will impact pricing. But here's the thing. You've got to run a really good drop and hook program, meaning if you say to your LTL carrier, drop me 5 trailers, and you turn one over within 4 days, that's not good for the carrier because you're holding up their asset. So if you can really look at it, and it takes some time to figure it out, and it's where data really helps, but looking at, let's just say you're in one location. Currently, what is your live loading time looking like? Are you scheduling appointments for live pickups? And what is the labor involved for you at the warehouse level in that environment? And then what you want to look at is, can I man a drop and hook? Now, you may today be live loading with your during the day shift. But if you look at drop and hook, it may make a whole lot more sense to actually do it on your second shift, not your first shift. So all of that comes into play. The other thing you want to think about is we've actually seen, and this has happened, where we looked at this whole live loading, drop and hook using the LTL carrier's equipment. And where we ended up, and it does depend on volumes, where we ended up is we did a study, and it made the most sense for the shipper at the DC to actually get a yard spotter, rent some trailers, and so he went, and it was outsourced. But you could, if you had a warehouseman who had a driver's license, you could buy your own yard spotter. You could drop, lease, or rent trailers, and you can run that drop and hook back and forth to carriers' LTL terminals, and then you really get some cost savings in your freight. But you absolutely need to measure it. There isn't a one-size-fits-all answer, but it's a great question, and it will impact the pricing, usually in your favor as a shipper. So I hope that answers the question.
Jill, this is Steve. Just one quick thing to add to that. I think you're exactly right when you talk about pricing and operations, but not really part of this webinar. But another consideration is going to be technology. If you're in a transportation management system, and really where it gets a little bit murky potentially, if you're not really clear with your carriers, is on the delivery end, right? So a big benefit of having a TMS is being able to understand when your freight is delivered. That's one of the primary reasons that companies buy is for the track and trace capabilities, and especially around deliveries, right? For publicly traded companies that are on the webinar, that's potentially where you're recognizing revenue. So it's really powerful to understand when your freight's being delivered. But some carriers do have some difficulties or some hesitations about passing messages that say delivered for drop trailers. So you really need to kind of flesh out that process. And hands up, that's something that we had probably took us about 6 months to figure out in our own internal operations, and something that gave us a little bit of trouble was trying to figure out delivery messages for drop trailer programs.